ever made a low-carb baking recipe only to have it fall apart on you when you went to eat it? That can be so frustrating. Well, in this bonus video, I'm going to share with you why that happens and how to stop it from happening in the future. When I first started baking low carb, I would make these baked goods that would smell so good. They would look great coming out of the oven, but then after they cooled and I'd go to eat them, they would be this dry, crumbly, dense mess. I'd pick up a cookie and it would just crumble, or I'd put my fork into a cake and it would be dry and crumbly, and I could not for the life of me figure out why. So I got on trusty old Google, did some research, talked to some other people, looked at some different recipes, and found out the reason was so simple and right in front of my face. Low-carb alternative flours do not have a binding agent. Duh! White flour and wheat flour contain gluten. Gluten acts as glue when it comes in contact with the moisture in your recipes. And so therefore, it glues the ingredients together and the baked goods come out soft and fluffy and everything all intact, no crumblies all over the place. Well, when you use almond flour or garbanzo flour that I use all the time, or any other type of alternative flour, they do not contain gluten. Therefore, they have no glue to hold your ingredients together. So, you have to find a binding agent substitute. And lucky for you, I have 3 that I use all the time and that work great. The first one that I probably use the most of is Vital Wheat Gluten. Vital Wheat Gluten is made from a protein, gluten itself I should say, is a protein that directly comes from the wheat berry. So in order to make Vital Wheat Gluten, they grind up the wheat berry into wheat flour, then they take the wheat flour and they add some water in it to make a dough. They knead the dough until the gluten becomes active and the dough is very elasticy. Then they rinse the dough with water to remove all the starches. Then they dry it and they ground it back into flour, and it's on our shelf known as Vital Wheat Gluten or pure gluten. Now, you might say, well, if it's made from wheat flour, doesn't it have the same amount of carbs as wheat? No, it does not. And that is all because of the process that I just told you about. When they are making Vital Wheat Gluten, they rinse the dough of all of its starches. So all that contains is pure 100% gluten, and it is drastically different in carbs than wheat flour. 1 cup of Vital Wheat Gluten roughly has about 16 grams of carbs in it. Not very much at all. 1 cup of white flour or wheat flour contains about 95 grams of carbs. I mean, a huge, huge, huge difference. So, if you put Vital Wheat Gluten into your recipe, you're not going to have a ton of added carbs, and you're also not going to have huge blood sugar spikes if you're diabetic. If you're diabetic, you know that if you eat white flour or wheat flour, that your blood sugar is going to be going through the roof because of the amount of carbs that are in those flours. Well, when you add Vital Wheat Gluten, it's so low in carbs, you don't have to worry about that. You know, if you've seen my video on the fluffy low-carb hamburger buns, you'll see that I use 1 cup of Vital Wheat Gluten in there. I use Vital Wheat Gluten mostly for breads that contain yeast, because I need that elasticity in the dough in order for the dough to rise properly. So if you watched my video on the low-carb hamburger buns, you'll see that I used 1 cup of Vital Wheat Gluten. So that helped my dough to be elasticy, so my buns were fluffy. If I wouldn't have used the gluten in there, I would have had flat buns, and nobody wants flat buns. So Vital Wheat Gluten is an awesome, awesome binding agent when you are using a gluten-free flour. However, not everybody can tolerate gluten. Some people have allergies to wheat, or they have different allergies to the gluten, or they just want to stay away from it for one reason or another. So I have 2 other binding agents that I use when I am cooking strictly gluten-free. And one of them is psyllium husk powder. Psyllium husk powder is made from grinding the husks of a seed from a plant called Plantago ova or something like that, something weird like that. It's also known as desert Indian wheat, psyllium. It's known as several different names. It's basically grown wild in the southwestern part of the United States. So it's a local plant. So basically they take the plant, they extract the seeds, they take the husk off the seeds, they grind the husks into a powder, and we use it as a binding agent in gluten-free recipes. Psyllium husk powder reacts the same way as gluten would. When it comes in contact with the liquid, it turns into that gummy substance. It holds all the ingredients together, and therefore your baked goods come out nice and yummy and no crumblies, no falling apart. I use it mostly for bread type recipes that don't require rising, like tortillas or pasta dough, things that are flat, quick breads, things that don't require a huge amount of lift. Sometime down the road, I'll be sharing with you one of my low carb tortilla recipes. And in this recipe, I use 1.5 tablespoons of psyllium husk. I used to make the recipe without psyllium husk, and my tortillas would fall apart. They would be okay if I was just using a light wrap, just like maybe a couple thin deli sliced meats and real thinly sliced cheese or something like that. It would work. But when I tried to use it for burritos or put more substance into my wraps, it would just fall apart. But when I started adding the psyllium husk to it, it stayed together, and I was able to put more hearty stuff into my wrap, and I was able to use it for burritos, tacos, soft tacos, whatever, So that psyllium husk was a lifesaver for me there. I can now make yummy tortillas without them falling apart on me. So psyllium husk is a great binding agent for gluten-free baking. Now, if you know anything about psyllium husk, you might have heard that it is a natural laxative. It is, but you have to use it in larger and more concentrated amounts. When you are baking with it, you're not going to use any more than maybe 2 to 4 tablespoons in your baking. You're not going to use a lot of it at all. And it's going to get dispersed throughout the entire recipe. It's going to disintegrate, turn into the gooeys, and you're not going to get that laxative effect. So you don't have to worry about, if I'm going to make tortillas tonight, I'm going to have to run to the bathroom right afterwards. You don't have to worry about that because that's not going to happen. I know, I've made them and it doesn't happen. So even though you might have heard that it's a natural laxative, you don't have to worry about that when you're using it in baking because you do not use a lot of it. Another binding agent that I use is xanthan gum. Now this one is going to totally creep you out. When I tell you how it's made, you are going to run for the hills and never ever want to use it again. But I'll tell you, xanthan gum, you actually probably eat almost every day and you don't even realize it. It's in your sauces, salad dressings, it's in all kinds of things. Most things that you buy in the store that have a thicker, gummier type texture, they contain xanthan gum in some way, shape, or form. So when you hear what it's made of, don't get creeped out because you've probably already eaten it several times and don't even know it. But xanthan gum, what it is it is a bacteria. I don't even know how to pronounce it right, actually. It's known as Xanthamos campestris, something like that. Basically, it's what makes the brown spots on your vegetables when they start to rot. Yum. So you take that bacteria and you add it to sucrose or glucose, which is a naturally occurring sugar that they derive from usually corn, sometimes soy and wheat, but mostly corn. But they take that sucrose or that glucose, they combine it with that bacteria, then they add a liquid solvent and they ferment it, then they dry it and grind it up into powder, put it on your shelf as xanthan gum, and we put it in our baked goods. Doesn't that sound yummy? Trust me, It's not as gross as it sounds, and like I said, you probably already ate it before and don't even know it. But it makes a great, great, great binding agent for gluten-free baking. It does exactly what gluten and psyllium husk does. When it comes in contact with liquid, it turns gummy and gooey and glues all of your ingredients together. Now, before you freak out and be like, oh my goodness, she wants me to put bacteria in my food. You eat bacteria all the time. You eat cheese. That's from mold. You eat sour cream. That's just what it says, soured cream. Wine is made with bacteria. Yeast that you have in those nice fluffy breads that you love, that's a bacteria. Anything fermented is a bacteria, so you're eating bacteria on a regular basis. So not all bacteria is hurtful and going to kill you, just let you know. So xanthan gum is not going to hurt you, it's not going to kill you, but you do want to use it in small amounts, because I will tell you, a little bit goes a long way. When I make cookies, if you saw my video on my low-carb macadamia nut cookies, I only used a half teaspoon of xanthan gum for that whole recipe. So a little bit is all you need. You won't ever need probably no more than 1 teaspoon. Anytime I use 1 teaspoon, it's usually in a bread recipe that requires yeast. Most of the time I use vital wheat gluten in yeast recipes, but if I'm wanting to make it completely gluten-free, I will use xanthan gum and only about 1 teaspoon. But generally for cookies, cakes, that kind of stuff, I will use only a half teaspoon of xanthan gum, because if you use too much of this, it will turn into a slimy, goopy, gummy mess, and it will be nasty. Especially if you're using it as a thickener, because you can use it as a thickener to replace flour in gravies and sauces and salad dressings, that kind of thing. But again, very, very little. Otherwise, you will have a slimy sauce and it will be disgusting. So it's something that you use very little of, and just because it's a bacteria, it's not going to harm you, so don't freak out about it. It's good stuff, believe me. It works wonderful. So these are the 3 binding agents that I use the most of. I hope this helped you. I hope the next time that you make some gluten-free baked goods, they turn out perfect and you won't have to worry about them crumbling all over the place anymore. Stay tuned. Remember, Friday, I will be posting a new recipe video, as always, every Friday. And if you enjoyed this extra bonus video, let me know in the comments. Give me a like, give me a thumbs up, subscribe. Let me know if you want to know more tips, more tricks about cooking low carb. If you have any other questions, put them down in the comments and I will do my best to answer them. Again, like and subscribe. And until next time we see you again, as always,